Hello everybody. I'm Marcel de Graaf, member of the European Parliament for Forum for Democracy in the Netherlands. And I have here 4 guests. Joachim Koes, who is also a member of the European Parliament for Alternative für Deutschland in Germany. Willem Engel, who is a human rights activist focusing on the safety of the corona vaccines, and who has also a background in pharmaceutical science. Then, on my left hand, I have 2 renowned scientists, Wiebeke Manneke, who is a medical doctor, and Max Schmeling, who is a statistician.
Yes.
Do I pronounce it right this time?
Yes.
Okay, and they both are authors of a study which goes into the side effects of the corona vaccines and how they relate to different batches, because you have different sets of the amount of side effects related to different batches, which is very concerning, but we'll come to that later. And we have here in front of us a letter from the European Medicines Agency, and that's the agency who is responsible for the approval for the European market of medicines, and who is the watchdog when it comes to the safety of medicines on the European market. And they approved the corona vaccines. Well, we just received this letter. We have we checked very well what they said here, and I have here 4 people who are eager to give their comments on this letter. Let me start with you, Joachim. This letter, what does it tell us? I think it's shocking.
Yeah, sure. You are right. It's really shocking because it will become clear. It becomes clear that they know quite well what they are doing, and they received a lot of badges, a lot of information from the pharmaceutical companies, and they got all these reports of them, which are under we cannot look into it and so on, and they saw it and they tested it for themselves, and they should have known that all these vaccines they are getting, which I wanted to approve, that they are not reliable, that they are not, that they have too much side effects, and that there is a risk, a too big risk for the vaccinated persons who get the vaccinations, and therefore it was for me. It's really because irresponsible
but
to act
they're
like
not
that.
exactly saying in
No,
this letter,
not that.
well, these vaccines, they're not good.
Sure, they are. Don't say it, but you can find it between the lines. When you look very carefully into it, then they say it's not. They are not safe, and they are not trustworthy, and therefore that's so astonishing that they are honest enough to write such things into their letter. And you must read it carefully, and then you can say, What's that really? How can you approve these vaccines? How can you give them to millions of people? That's really irresponsible.
But they are also saying, well, we didn't approve them for giving them to millions of people. We gave them for protection of the individual only, and not for transmission control. Willem, transmission control.
Yeah, that's true. So the whole idea about group immunity and having the pressure on the whole population was the idea that if you reach sterile immunity, then it fades out. Then the contamination stops, and we actually get out of the pandemic. Of course, that happened, as with any other flu season, it waxes and wanes. Now, they are trying to state that there has been a lot of benefit and that the vaccines have been crucial. Well, first of all, it's not vaccines. Second of all, there is no data at all that shows that the waning of the infections of coronavirus have very little to do with the injections. And what this letter shows is that they knew that beforehand because it was never tested, even never designed. So the market approval is not given for transmission control, but solely to get personally immunized, read that you dampen the symptoms of a coronavirus infection.
Yes, because they say here, loud and clear, you're right. We are right when we said, well, these corona vaccines, they are not good, and they don't work when it comes to transmitting your own, infecting when you have the coronavirus, infecting someone else. And they say, well, these vaccines, they don't work for that.
They don't hinder transmission.
They're not designed for that. They're not approved for that. We only approve them so that you can be individually protected. All the governments in the EU member states said, get yourself vaccinated for your neighbors, your sick and old parents, grandparents, for your students when you're a professor in class, or for your patients when you're a doctor, or someone who takes care of patients in hospitals. That is why they try to persuade us.
That last group, of course, doesn't work because that's solely dependent on stopping the transmission. What I read between the lines is that they say, well, it would be a disservice to not have these injections available on the market for the frail and elderly. But with that, they admit that it doesn't do any benefit to the majority of the people who are not frail and elderly. So it is almost an admittance of malfeasance, I would say.
Whoa, that's a big
accusation.
Point what you're making here. Because I thought it was already shocking that all these governments who are pushing the vaccine, because then you would not transmit the virus to someone else, that it was not approved for that use at all. And Wiebeke, you're a medical doctor. In the Netherlands, they said about some of these medicines like ivermectin or HCQ, that they were, when you would, as a doctor, prescribe them to a patient to treat the symptoms of the corona vaccine illness, that it was off-label. But now it seems to me as if governments were using these vaccines off-label. Well, is that correct? What does it mean? What is this off-label? Is that terrible?
No, but it's very obvious. I think this is heartbreaking, but because we have known for ages that the transmission was, the transmission story was a scam because we didn't have the science behind it. We knew that already when you have the emergency authorization.
Yes, they say we have a lack of data on transmissibility.
Exactly, there is no data, so of course you couldn't say that, but still you had like the governments, the health authorities actually lying to the people. And I knew that because I knew there wasn't any data, but what I'm concerned about is that how much damage this has done to young people, to children even this moment still being vaccinated around the world, pregnant women, healthy people, not even if they had corona, maybe they would just have one cough, and that was it, and someone wouldn't even realizing they had it because there was no risk in it. And for me, when I read the letter just the other day for the first time, I was actually heartbroken by it because it's like we knew that, but we didn't do anything. And that's exactly the same with our data, our science, that these safety signals, which we have proven with our science, they should know that in EMA and the national institutes, but they didn't do anything. They ignored it. Maybe they even hided it away. Maybe they even, I'm not saying they tampered with the numbers, maybe they did. But when you read that, I feel as a doctor, but also as a part of the public, you can't trust them if that is the case. Because what's going to happen next time that they take, like you said correctly, this is gene therapy. What's going to happen next time if they are so irresponsible, don't have the responsibility to act and behave properly how we would expect them to do? So I think the answer is both ignorant in that respect that they haven't done anything, but also heartbreaking when you think about all the children, the young ones, the people who have just suddenly died without no reason apart from being vaccinated. I think that's heartbreaking.
Yes, because that's what they actually say in the letter. They say, well, it's for the individual only, and a doctor should consider to administer the vaccine or not, based on whether or not a patient should have benefit from such a vaccine. And if there is no risk when you get the corona illness, then basically you don't need a vaccine, because, well, it's like you get these symptoms of a cold, of a flu. It passes away, and that's it, and you have natural immunization.
Exactly.
So there's no need for vaccination, only when there is a specific medical condition that you need to administer such a vaccine, or that you at least could recommend it. That's what they say here.
Yeah.
And that is, as you say, children, young people, basically everybody under the age of 60, 70 even, should not be vaccinated because they don't have a risk.
Exactly.
And that means that everybody who has vaccine damage and is under the age of 70 has this unnecessarily.
Exactly, for
and
no
that
reason.
is heartbreaking. So everyone who has a partner or a child or a parent who is suffering from vaccination damage.
Yeah, they can't even more pretend that they did it to protect someone else, because that's a lie, and we knew that, and we know that for sure now.
And the EMA knew it.
Yeah.
I didn't get any warning from them.
No,
Perhaps
exactly.
governments did, but then the government ignored it.
Yeah.
But they pushed the vaccine even for babies.
Exactly, terrible.
And then
yeah.
there are even more problems, and you both dived into this, into the side effects, because side effects determine whether or not a vaccine or a medicine is safe, isn't it? I mean, if you have a lot of serious side effects, you take it off the market.
Exactly.
If you have like 1 in 1,000 dies from a medicine, then you take it off the market. It's too risky.
You should do, at least. Yeah.
You should.
Yeah.
So you made this research, scientific research, into the data. Well, you are the statistician.
Yes, and what our research shows is that there is not one adverse reaction profile. We would expect from a vaccine that it produces more or less the same amount of adverse events all through its life, and regardless of whether you get one of the first vaccines or whether you get one of the last vaccines, or whether it's the first or the second time you get vaccinated. But what our study shows is that they're not one profile, there's three. There's one profile. It was mainly in the beginning, where most European countries received small batches that had an extremely high incidence of adverse reactions. Then later we see an enormous drop in the adverse reactions
From another batch.
from another series of batches, which then again drops again to a level where almost no adverse reactions are recorded. And the story actually goes on. It's not in our study, but when we look at the data for the bivalent boosters, they show an even lower level of adverse reactions. So it's the fact that the adverse reactions are different across time we haven't found an explanation. Many explanations have been put forward to try and talk around this problem, but nobody has been able to provide a satisfactory explanation for why do we observe this in the Danish adverse reaction data. And I should note it's the official data that we have FOIA'd from the Danish Serum Institute and from the Danish Medical Agency. And the fact that there is no explanation very strongly points to that this is a product problem. This is a problem with the product, and it straight away it means that nobody has been able to give informed consent about this. Nobody had, because I mean, you go down, you line up in the queue to get vaccinated, and you ask, all right, well, can you tell me something about the risk? How dangerous is it? And nobody would be able to give you an answer. The product itself makes it completely impossible. So in the essence, you can say that everybody was actually vaccinated illegally.
Yes, because you could either have a very serious side effect or none at all.
Yes.
Quite unpredictable because you have 3 profiles dependent on the batch.
Exactly.
Either you have the batch with the serious side effects, or you have the batch with the almost absent side effects, or somewhere
Yes.
in the middle. And
Yes.
there are basically 3 types of vaccines
You could
instead
say
of
that,
one.
yes.
And that is of course absurd, because the EMA only approved one product,
Exactly.
and that should have one profile of side effects. So we are
But I
getting
also,
in a swamp here, a very tricky type of product.
But I also think
Yes.
it's a problem that they hadn't withdrawn some of the bad batches, because I lack trust to them now, because with any medicine, usually if there's a problem with a batch, they will, the minute after they realize that's the case, they will withdraw it from the market. They will send a letter for all the doctors, take this away and don't give that to the patients because it's dangerous. Here they have the facts, they have the signals, it's very obvious even before we made the publication, and they haven't done anything.
Well, we don't know actually, because what is striking is that the batches that were administered earliest are also the smallest batches. So are they really the smallest, or did they get rid of the rest because they saw in the early data that there were a lot of adverse effects? So when you look at the clinical trials, you see that they actually tested at least 3 types of formulations. So did they use that to experiment further after the clinical trials? And when we look at the extension of the market authorization for the variant, the Omicron XBB 1.5, they actually admit in this letter that they do not need further scientific studies because they base their safety profile on the previous work. But this is another variant, this is another formulation. So they break all their own rules, and they're so brazen about it, it is that they try to whitewash it in this reply to us.
That's incredible. That's really incredible, isn't it? And then I think it goes even further, because they're talking about, well, even if you are vaccinated, if you get in contact with the virus for multiple times, you still have a high chance of infections. So what product is this? And then, to make it even worse, the immune effect wanes over time. They don't specify how much time, but I saw in the last years that this so-called this so-called time period of the immunization. First they said, well, no, it's like a year. And then it became half a year. And then they said, no, well, just do the booster and the revaccination after 3 months.
Yes.
Now, what is it? What is wanes over time? What kind of product is this? Is this a vaccine?
No, so that is one of the characteristics of a vaccine. There's 2 essential parts to it. It needs to contain an antigen. mRNA is not an antigen, it's coding for an antigen. The other one is lasting or active immunity, compared to passive immunity, which you could elicit with antibody therapy. So in no way, whether you look at the genetic or chemical makeup, or whether you look at the effectiveness, you can call this a vaccine. So also it's a misnomer to market it or give a marketing authorization as a vaccine.
So even if it would be effective, which we can doubt given also the outcomes of your study. So it's not effective, and if it would be a little bit effective, it wouldn't be long. And the EMA just admits it, and it doesn't work for transmissibility. So we are being injected with something, and they're not even considering natural immunity. What's happening here?
What I find very brazen is that they still claim that for each group, also for the healthy people between 18 and 65, the only group that had a phase 1 study, by the way, there is still a positive benefit to risk ratio, but I haven't seen any calculation. So we have to trust them? I don't know.
But to come to this risk, this risk assessment of the vaccine, the safety of the vaccine, they tell us that they expect, like with every vaccine, you know how it is at the vaccination moment or soon after, we will see most of the
reaction
of the adverse reactions, of the side effects.
Yes.
Well, then you should say, okay, let's study that. Let's see how many of these side effects you have. That was your quantitative study.
Yes.
Then you need to also look into and what is the quality of these side effects, and that means, is it just having a pain in the arm, or is it getting myocarditis and dying on a football field? I mean, it could be in this range, because we have seen these side effects in this range. Then you should register this, isn't it?
Definitely, yes, you should. And I think the part about safety is one of the it's one of the most offensive parts of their reply, because what they're really saying is that, well, all these adverse reactions that we could expect after vaccinations, well, they're really just presumed. We can't prove that they've got anything to do with vaccinations, and they specifically state that they actually expect that many vaccinated people will experience events like this after vaccination. But they are obviously, they state that they're presumed and they can't be related to the vaccine. But our study shows that the variation, the adverse reaction variation, is not random. If it's not random, there's got to be something that causes it, and this has got something to do with the product. So we're far beyond saying that something is presumed now. And if it's not presumed, how can they argue this? But I mean, it seems like they are stuck in pre-pandemic times, really,
Exactly.
when they are writing these things and completely ignoring all the newer findings.
So that is basically what we also see, that this study of yours was published. They weren't doing anything with it.
Exactly.
No.
Government started to vaccinate people, but not based on the market approval, and they just let it happen. And so,
and there's another problem with that the governments, they don't say, like the EMA, that these reports of conditions that are occurring at or soon after vaccinations, that EMA accepts, that it's normally very soon after the vaccination you got some side effects. That's normal. But in the governments who are giving you these vaccinations in the countries, they say another thing. They say no. If anybody has in the first 14 days of vaccination, after vaccination, when you get side effects or have problems or inflammation or something else, you know better than me what's that, then they say, oh no, it has nothing to do with the vaccination, because we are supposing that in the first 14 days the vaccines are developing their spike proteins and so on, and then it will develop and so on. And after 14 days, you can say, okay, if there are side effects, it could be from the vaccines. But the first 14 days, you are reckoned as unvaccinated. As unvaccinated. That's so stupid and so I don't find words about these statistical errors they are producing.
I think this amounts to fraud. What you're saying is that they play with the definition of vaccination status. But we also mentioned
that is not relevant for a authority.
Exactly.
A medicine authority doesn't work with.
They should look at the point of
with
injection.
definitions being adjusted for political needs. They are just responsible for your safety, for your health, isn't it?
Absolutely, but Joachim, what do you think about the fraud? Because they admit there was fraud in 3% of the population that was used in the clinical trial, but their response is baffling to me. That they say, well, yes, there is fraud, and we concur, but it's only 3%. You've been working with audits. How does that work?
If you say 3% is a quantité négligeable, then that's bad. That's really bad. It's bad thinking. 3% of persons who are vaccinated. That's millions and millions of people. And therefore, I'm not sure what they are thinking here and what they are saying. It's just too bad. We can't accept anything higher than 0.0001%. Yeah? That's all other things are too high. Therefore, if there are 10 persons in other, I learned that when the EMA looks into vaccination reports and so on, by other things like measles or something else, then if there are 10 possible deaths in the whole system, then they stop the system. They stop it. They retreat and retract these vaccines. But we have thousands reported deaths. And they're doing nothing.
But also, I think one thing is they are ignoring it and not doing anything, and I think that's worrying. But also, you talk about the
the governments are covering it up.
And the governments maybe were the main
obscuring
liars.
or corrupting the database on which they've based their
But I think
safety.
maybe they were the main liars, because maybe they knew, as you said, maybe they knew that the transmission was a lie, and they still told the whole public, it's the transmission, go and save grandma at home, So maybe the governments, and I think that's interesting to find out, who was actually lying deliberately, who was actually knowing that this is the huge lie, this is the big corona scam, but I'm just pretending, because I think that's the dangerous part, because this could happen again. And I must say, with the side effects, I think it's important to say that our study is a startup, so to speak. We need to get further information about all-cause mortality, about turbo cancer. We have the DNA contamination thing going on. I mean, I think it's very important that doctors and health authorities keep a track on the badges to see whether they will give further, a degree of cancers, of autoimmune diseases, and so on. And therefore, we need to acknowledge the study and the safety signal, also to go forward and look into cancers, mortality, and so on. I think that's a very important, because one thing is getting a little sore spot here at the arm, but another thing is, will we have people dying? We know that already. Will many more people be dying from cancers and so on? Excellent. So that is a responsibility.
And that is why you correctly said that this letter basically also is heartbreaking.
Yes.
And it asks for a follow-up on what's actually happening also on the long term with the side effects. I also want to know, this is now known to us. What did the governments know?
Exactly.
How could they ignore this?
Definitely.
And there is a lot in here what was known from the first day, and still we got these incredible, damaging vaccination campaigns. So we are certainly going to follow up. We're going to send a second letter to the European Medicines Agency, and we hope that we will get more information coming as a response to this second letter. Thank you all for being here with me on the table.
Thank you.
And
thank you.
Well, hopefully we'll see each other soon again with a second letter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can stop these vaccines.
This minute, exactly.